All right, I'd like to reconvene the budget hearings. It is October 31st, which happens to be Halloween, and I don't know if there's any correlation with Sheriff Martin presenting this morning, but...
I'm dressed up in my costume.
Yeah, your costume on.
So anyway, thank you all for coming, and thank you for the preparation ahead of time, the material, and we'll turn it over to you and let you run with it.
Okay, well, I think Karen First is making copies of our latest work plan. A final edit was done last night with the most recent update, so I think you should be getting that here.
She's coming in right now.
Shortly. I want to recognize I have both majors here today, Jeff Balzer and Dave Wiseman. If there's any questions regarding their specific divisions, they can always answer those. And then Captain Vance is present as usual. He remains the fleet manager for the office, and obviously one of the large capital expenditures in the Sheriff's Office is the maintenance of the fleet. So Scott is always prepared to answer any questions you might have about fleet management. I want to recognize the efforts of the Director of Administrative Services, Pam Sanageri, and our Finance Manager, Leslie Armstrong, a newlywed. I've been calling her Leslie Ross. It's Leslie Armstrong. Both of them have worked diligently with our internal team and Cy Keeley to provide for you our 2018 budget request. In preparation for the budget, we confer with staff in determining needs based upon demand for services, crime trends, auditing, and oversight. Our goal is to focus on quality of life issues for our residents while attempting to present a responsible budget that helps drive professionalism and minimize exposure to risk and liability, both externally and internally. All this should be aligned with our vision to protect people, their property, and their constitutional rights. We believe that we've identified 3 significant initiatives that we intend to focus on in 2018, and those are captured on page 10 in the work plan that you just received. These initiatives are a result of current trends and analysis of drug, crime, and traffic data acquired to date. We have also included internal goals which will improve auditing, align us with nationally accepted standards, and better prepare our deputies and corrections officers to handle the demands placed on them in a continually changing environment. The reality of these initiatives are ongoing demand for service, and the need to continue to provide internal support for our basic core functions requires additional staffing. Staffing requests are reflected in an itemized format on page 6 in our work plan. In an effort to continue to foster complete transparency with you, the Commissioners, we are prepared to answer any questions you may have about our request. I'm excited to offer that through a collaborative effort with our county clerk, the county will realize a funding offset to place additional requested deputies in our new and much larger county courthouse. Lastly, we are well aware that our proposed 2018 budget reflects increases in both expenditures and revenues. Ongoing capital needs in both the Corrections Division and within our Drug Task Force and Patrol are major expenditures that impact our overall budget request. We are still confident that it is a responsible budget based on demand in the continually growing Delaware County. We respect the difficult funding decisions that this body has to make on an ongoing basis, and as always, the Delaware County Sheriff's Office looks forward to working with the Board and problem-solving any issues confronted in the budget process. So with that, we'll entertain any questions you might have about our budget, and I'll direct most specific items, budget items found within the budget to Leslie Armstrong, our fiscal manager. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. We'll turn it over. Questions?
Do you just want Leslie just to walk through her budget?
Sure, that'd be fine. That's probably a good idea,
Sure.
give an overview of some of the numbers.
Okay. Well, we will first, I'm going to primarily hit upon our law enforcement and our jail. Those are our 2 biggest, obviously, cord keys that we deal with. And kind of walk through those percentages. We have an overall request percent change from 2017 to 18 for our LE of 13.8%. And we can walk through some of those differences. We'll kind of highlight some items. First and foremost, we probably should talk about our position request. As the Sheriff previously stated, we are requesting 17 additional positions. These are based on compliance. These are based on improving our accuracies, our safety, and also just making sure that we are So first and foremost, let's walk through the positions that we're requesting for the Sheriff's Office. We have a fiscal specialist. Again, this is based upon internal control, increased improvement in reporting to our department heads, such as our two majors who are here, as well as to the sheriff. We have a labor relations coordinator. This is designed because we have 5 very aggressive bargaining units who are in the need of consistency and alignment with the office's approach to labor relations. An IT director. Obviously, we're dealing with very sensitive information in the course of our work. It requires high security. Additional software implementation, such as timekeeping, will be necessary with the size of our workforce. We have a property technician. Additional staffing is necessary in preparation of cases, disposition, and collection of evidence and auction items. We have a request for an SRO sergeant, which also covers the community relations. We have 9 SROs, and the community involvement justify additional management responsibilities. We have a request for a detectives unit for an administrative assistant. Again, this is to alleviate clerical responsibilities from the detectives and provide consistent delivery of cases to our prosecutor. So we also have a support sergeant. Again, additional management responsibility is necessary for the 18 deputies that are part of our support system. An ops supervisor for our analyst unit. This is the supervision of 3 analysts, coordination and delegation of specialized projects. Again, we've provided some of that analysis within our current work plan. A training coordinator. That's the coordination of firearm range activities, ongoing CPT, and governance of all requirements. We don't have this in place currently. And then the addition of 5 deputies, 1 for the community relations officer. Again, we are trying to be proactive in the area of community relations. The SRO, as we have a new school coming, we'll definitely have to have that. And then 3 support deputies for the courthouse. Again, there's a memo attached to our work plan from Clerk of Courts, Natalie Frable, where she is also supporting this and providing funds towards this. And then finally, we have a social media specialist. Again, social media right now is huge. This is a part-time position, but it is to address the communications between the public and the Sheriff's Office due to that social media engagement. Those are the additional requests for headcount for the law enforcement side of our budget. If you have questions, feel free. Otherwise, I'll continue to kind of walk through the remainder of the budget for that week.
You talk about, if I read this correct, 3 court service deputies. We're closing the courthouse and we're opening it. Could someone explain why we need 3 more?
You actually have the major here today who's been working on that initiative. Major Balzer, would you like to address that?
Sure. What we've contemplated is that the Sheriff's Office would take over the responsibility for screening and security in the Common Pleas Courthouse from Trident Security. This is something that the sheriff and the clerk have spoken together about to increase the security and professionalism of the staff. I've got the memo here with me. But basically, I understand that the contract for Trident Security expires, I think, around April of next year. We had talked, the sheriff had talked with the clerk's willing to put funds towards this. Our 3 additional deputies would replace the Trident security guards that are currently at the courthouse. What we would have then would be all deputy sheriffs in charge of the security at the courthouse. Those positions, if you can imagine them, right now we have 2 deputies assigned to the Common Pleas Courthouse. As of next week, we will have 3. Because we've got additional agencies the size, we're actually having 3 deputies over there in the courthouse. But those are just assigned to the courts and transport. Trident is still handling the screening down front and also the control room, which monitors all the video and alarms throughout the building. What we're looking to do is to take over that function for Trident. We believe that we can add professionalism, we can add the duties that a sheriff deputy does to provide better service to the courthouse.
Do you know what the cost differential is between the contract and the...
It's $174,000.
Additional?
Additional, that's what the clerk of courts is going to pick up, the additional cost
Oh, okay,
between what the deputies and what the Trident contract is.
okay.
I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Yes, sir.
Some people tell me I'm good at that. And I have had nothing to do with Trident being the security at the old courthouse, but someone made a decision that that was acceptable and a level that made sense. So I need to help me understand why that no longer makes sense.
I think I can address that then.
Yes, sir.
So, Commissioner Mayor, I was here when that occurred. Obviously, I wasn't with the sheriff's office, but kind of watched that unfold. It's certainly a good question, and frankly, this is not it's not an opportunity to say anything disparaging about Trident. I think they've done a fine job as a private contractor. This was an opportunity to re-embed the sheriff's office back into the much larger facility. There are some things that we can do that Trident can't do. Obviously, we have arrest powers. They don't have. We have direct communication in emergency situations with our radio. We do have a requirement of level of training higher than Trident. I think Trident has done a serviceable job, and we have a good working relationship with them. The opportunity presented itself when the county clerk, Natalie Fravel, approached us about two things. One was the request for additional security in a much larger facility. Frankly, the judges themselves have asked for a larger presence of deputies in that facility. And the fact that with the particular fund that she has, Cy can probably recall the name of the fund, she has available to help offset the cost difference between the deputies and the current contract. So we saw this as a potential win-win. We could provide additional law enforcement presence in that jail, in that court, provide additional law enforcement presence, meet the request of the judges, and then have no additional impact upon the commissioner's general fund budget with the assistance of the county clerk.
It raises another question. The question being, trying to say how to phrase this. First of all, I consider it all county funds regardless, so I don't place a lot of value on that because I think it's county fund, taxpayers' dollars regardless. But having set that aside for a second, is this commitment a one-year commitment or a forever commitment? Because once they're in place, they're there forever.
That's a great question. We've talked about that at length. We know that the county clerk has 3 years remaining on her term, and she's made a commitment as long as she's the county clerk that she will continue to offset that difference. We've had conversations with Cy about the projected revenue into that fund, and Cy can speak to that, but I believe there's a confidence that those funds will continue to be there. And so if at the end of Ms. Fravel's 3-year term something were to happen, we've had ongoing attrition in our office in the past. I would think those positions could be assimilated into the sheriff's office. But to be honest with you, I feel pretty confident that any county clerk would see the benefit of additional security provided by the sheriff's office in that facility. And I think it's going to be a long-term. My suggestion is that it would be a long-term win-win for both court security and for the sheriff's office in the county.
One last question, maybe better for Cy. Each year there is a transfer of funds from that account to the general fund. If that account is going to transfer less money, indirectly we're paying for just an apple bite in, I don't have to go through that.
Sure.
But so is that going to affect the transfer to the general fund as far as reducing it by that $174,000, or is that going to stay the same?
It wouldn't reduce the transfer.
So it'd be that plus 174? Okay.
transfer isn't the same every year. I mean, it goes up and down significantly.
So-
It varies
Up and
quite a
down,
bit.
it all depends on what her remaining balance is and what she's willing.
So in theory, it could affect you.
It could.
Yeah.
Now, in the security, I assume, is in the facilities budget? Trident,
No, it's in my budget.
in your budget? Has that budget been, is it reflective of the reduction?
No, not at this time.
So obviously, we do this, it'll have to be redone. Is that going to affect how much we're paying Trident for Hayes and what board? The other, the other buildings?
No, because we're, by contract, we're set by costs per security guard.
Okay, I think that answers my questions regarding that particular issue. Obviously, this is a lot of people,
Absolutely.
and it's going to require a lot of soul searching on the part of all of us. And I'm not sure I'm prepared to ask all those questions at this point in time. The courthouse was an obvious one. The Berlin additional person, which for the high school I understand, but that is, I'm assuming, would be reflective in the budget at least till mid-year.
It's at second quarter.
It'd be
Sec-
towards the end of the school year is when we'd like to put that in place.
We would like to have that SRO on with a little bit of time remaining in the school year to get them acclimated to the next school year. So, I mean, I will tell you, regardless how the budget's managed from an operational standpoint, we want to appoint that school resource officer, give them an opportunity to get acclimated with the new building and kind of get a lay of the land. It just kind of get them ready to start the school
My
year.
point was it taken into consideration, it really wouldn't be first year. You've answered that, so we
Yes.
can debate when, but I understand your point.
And I'm sure you remember this, too. It's an offset position. We have a contract with the schools. They help, they pay about 50% of their salary.
And that's reflected in the budget. I'm not sure I'm prepared right now, but at some point, it might be helpful if you prioritize these vacancies, these positions you want to add. It might help the commissioners as we make an evaluation, and inevitably, as we go through these budgets, we're going to have to make some decisions. And so, at least from my perspective, I think it'd be helpful if confidentially you want to provide that. If you don't want to do it publicly, I would understand that as far as helping us make that evaluation.
Sure, and Leslie Armstrong's provided just kind of a real brief overview, summary of each position. We're prepared to, explain more in depth of the value of each one of those positions for the office. So, as always, we're more than willing to provide that information. So we'll certainly take that back and under advisement, and then if the administrator wants additional information, we can certainly provide that at any point, too.
I think it'd be helpful for me. I can't speak for
Yes,
other commissioners,
yes.
but I think it'd be very helpful. And the description you mentioned would be helpful as well.
Sure.
I mean, I'm looking at the list, but the list doesn't tell me very much.
Absolutely. And we anticipated that, so apart from providing, another 20 or 40 pages of documentation, but we can certainly provide anything the commissioners need for further explanation. We vetted these just as thoroughly internally, so we anticipated the questions, so we're prepared to defend the position, but more than willing to do that.
That's all I have at this point.
Commissioner Lewis?
Ready? I like the idea of replacing Trident with our own professional deputies. It's really, security is a heightened need today, and very, very obvious. There is a difference between someone who is professionally trained and someone who might have some training, but not the level of training that you all provide. And let alone, there's the buy-in when you're a county employee, when you're with the sheriff's department. I mean, there are a lot of intangibles, too, and that are very, very important when you're coming to, the basic safety of people in and out of that building. So I think it's a great idea.
I know I've said it before, when Major Balzer came over from the United States Marshals. He's a subject matter expert on court security. So the acquisition of his skill set at the time of our new court opening has been really beneficial. And frankly, Jeff has been through that building numerous times. He's worked with John on looking at not only the physical security, but also the internal security, soft security that we would categorize as our deputies. So I think this is a reasonable request, and I have to agree with you, Commissioner Lewis. I think it will notch up that level of security. We walked through the other day. It's a much bigger footprint, although we're closing one courtroom. I don't want to speculate, but I think the square footage is probably much larger than the two facilities. So, again, there's just a lot of areas that need protection. So we're grateful that Natalie Fravel was interested in assisting on that.
That's great. That's all I have for now.
Okay. Couple other topics. One that has been an issue in the past is vacancy. You have 23 vacancies right now. I think a year ago when we were discussing the 2017 budget, you had something like 23 vacancies then, and a year later you have 23 vacancies. I'm curious, maybe it's a question for Cy, but I'm curious how that is factored into the actual calculation of the budget dollars.
Well, I'll speak to that, but I also want to, I'm hoping that the Director of Administrative Services can tell you about how many people we have hired in the last 12 months. Do you know those numbers off the top of your head? Yeah.
What's not captured in this document in front of you, and when we talk about vacancies year over year, is our turnover rate specific to the jail. And this is something both internally we've had to contend with the labor units, and in the last 4 years it's not gone down. It's remained pretty much the same. And some of that turnover is good, and then some of that turnover is not good. Our turnover rate in the jail is about somewhere between 16% and 17%, which is still below the national average for jails. It is just a stepping stone for a lot of our folks that are interested in working in public safety. So last year, if we had 9 vacancies, we probably hired 12 people, and then we probably had that many people or more leave. So it really, or be promoted to the road, to the law enforcement side. So that piece of vacancies, those are our 2 primary vacancies, is the corrections officers unit and the deputies unit. The other complicating factor is our hiring process. We have taken this apart piece by piece, and there is, in order to both attract, retain, and hire good candidates, it takes at least 3 to 4 months to do a full background, our CVSA, really dig into someone's character. And that's kind of what our detectives are responsible for doing at this point. We trust them very much to make a recommendation for hire, but it does take quite a while to get those candidates both interested and to maintain their interest through the hiring process. And then, as you know, which is a good thing for our county, our unemployment rate's very low. So the candidates that we're seeing today are not necessarily the candidates that we saw in, I wasn't here, but in 2008 and 2009. We just don't have the number, so our pool is much more shallow. So we're working hard to fill the vacancies, but sometimes we're recruiting from as far away as 300 miles, sometimes out of state. And so I'd love to be able to commit to you that the Sheriff's Office would fill their vacancies year over year. It's just that's not a realistic goal. But it doesn't change our need, and it doesn't change the community's need either. So we're going to ask you for what the community is asking us for, and we're going to try and meet those goals, knowing that we can't just put warm bodies on the street, and we can't just put warm bodies in the jail, because that just leads to trouble. So that's kind of where we're coming from with our vacancies.
I will tell you, we currently have 5 deputies in the academy right now. Those are all brand-new hires. 5 candidates that did not have their certified peace officer training. They're in the academy. 2 of them are in our own internal academy at the Career Center. 3 of them are at the Ohio State Patrol Academy. So there's 5 that we've hired. And then on top of that, and 3 others that have been, so we've hired 8 deputies this year, and we had a resignation Friday, and I think we've had, I don't want to say 2 retirements because I could be off one. So I mean, we've had some attrition in the office. It's a slow go to hire these positions. As I've always tried to present in the budget, the complement of deputies I feel that we need to meet the demand of the community. And my request to the commissioners has always been to recognize what I would consider that authorized strength, regardless of whether or not we're able to fill them in a timely fashion. I wish I could wave a magic wand, as Pam has indicated, and get 12 great candidates overnight. But I will also tell you that when I talk to my colleagues in this profession, we continue to find it difficult to get the caliber of employee that we think is necessary to do this job.
Sure.
I'd like to also just make an additional comment. On those 2018 requested positions that you find on page 6, those positions are very specialized. They are, again, we do deal with the vacancies, and I would gladly provide you the documentation and detail behind each one of these, but these are very specialized. We're trying to be very detailed on who we employ.
Anyway, I think, and I understand, it's difficult to find really good people, especially in Delaware County. I understand that.
And again, Commissioner Benton, not to belabor the point, we did lose 3 candidates to the Hilliard Police Department and Dublin Police Department in the last year and a half. So we're competing with a very rich law enforcement community in Central Ohio, and we're all competing for those same very good candidates. So that does exasperate the situation a little bit in trying to keep those numbers up all the time.
Right. I think my question, I guess, is a more practical one. That is, assuming that you're going to continue, which is likely, I think everybody would agree, it's likely to be difficult to fill those positions. What do we do from a budget standpoint? Because if we don't budget all those positions for the whole year, then that makes it easier for us to allocate the funds, to balance the budget.
Right, and that's a good question. This office is certainly willing to work with the commissioners on that, and I'm well aware that one of the things that I've never done is, if we haven't filled those vacancies, we don't spend those monies elsewhere.
Oh, right.
So the money is obviously turned back into the general fund, and I agree with you. I would value the balanced budget, but if we were to get into the second or third quarter of the year, and we've identified those employees to hire, and the positions haven't been budgeted at that time, it would require me coming back for a supplemental, which I'm certainly interested in working with the commissioners on that. I just didn't want it to appear that I couldn't manage my budget and had to come back for supplemental. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
May I comment on that?
Yeah, sure.
We've had a history since I got on board the first year. We talked about, no one, especially somebody hires many people as Sheriff's Department, you never have all positions filled at one time. And I believe, so I can correct me if I'm wrong, we've had a number we put in the budget that kind of takes that into consideration. If it's 10% open by historical numbers, then we kind of subtract that out of the budget to get a more realistic number that you're really going to use during the year. Is that an accurate statement? So we've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. I'm guessing that's not currently reflected in the budget?
No.
So, but I think that's something you should consider, just making part of the budget process, because they're not going to be filled on day one.
Correct.
And I think it was to Commissioner Benton's point, every job I've ever held, that's always been a factor that you factor into the budget, because that gives you a more realistic budget than hypothetically every job's filled on day one, and stays filled for the whole year.
Sure.
It's not going to happen. Just wanted to add
Yeah,
that.
and we did the same thing in my career in the private sector. We always had a vacancy factor. Generally, it was 1%, 2, 3, 4, 5% of whatever the salaries were. You just know you're going to always have some vacancies.
Correct.
So we can work out the mechanics of that and figure out, because again, I think we would be receptive to, if you happen to just hit a hot streak and get a whole bunch of deputies and the other positions filled and you find yourself short, and people aren't leaving and all those factors, I think we'd be very willing to entertain a supplemental appropriation.
I appreciate that. I've always made a commitment to these commissioners, to the board, and I've maintained that for 5 years. Also, that I will not add additional positions to the budget than what I have presented to you during the budget cycle, and frankly, what I've felt has been authorized. So that's my commitment to the board. So if you determine during the budgeting process that to balance the budget, it makes sense to come back at a later time for a supplemental. I've also seen that become political, years past, but hopefully we're beyond that at this point.
Yeah. Hopefully we got that behind us.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense, just because you wouldn't be hiring everybody.
Sure.
January 1st
Right.
could be, yeah, it will be definitely, availability dependent and need. You've told us what the needs are, but then just the fact of hiring right away, it just won't happen.
Sure.
So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Good point.
Switching gears a little bit, on the jail, in particular, I don't know if you had any other additional information you wanted to talk about for the jail or not?
In respect to...
I had a few questions on the jail's budget, but...
Okay. In respect to vacancies, we actually had requested a sergeant for PREA, which is that is a new act. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Sure. It's the Prison Rape Elimination Act. This is something that Congress enacted a few years back. A lot of agencies mistakenly thought this only applied if you held federal prisoners. It does not. Eventually, the Department of Justice is going to require that every facility that holds any type of inmate is compliant with this act. What that requires is a set of standards. It takes time to build this up. It requires a set of standards and policies and an inspection. We want to be compliant. There are other facilities within the state of Ohio that are compliant, and I've talked to some of the folks who have done this, and it's doable. I think that in the foreseeable future, the U.S. Marshal Service, who we hold some prisoners for, they're going to require it. Right now, it's not officially required. They ask the question every year whether or not we are pretty compliant, but they don't penalize us for not being compliant. However, I can see that day coming. So this is something we want to do. In order to accomplish this, we are trying to have a supervisory level person not only be in charge of PREA, but also other inspections. So we're trying to get those all together, the policy and the inspections, to have that sergeant be responsible for it. It's something we've seen work well in some other facilities. We go around and tour other facilities, Stark County, Licking County, and we've seen what works in different places. And this popped out to us, to have a sergeant level person that is in charge of all the inspections, whether it's the Department of Rehab and Corrections or for PREA, and just updating the policy. It seems to work well to make sure we're compliant in all these areas. And this is a goal we'd like to become PREA compliant, because ultimately we're going to have to be.
The first question I had on the jail was, it looks like the number of federal inmates that we're housing is going down.
Correct.
Because the revenue is,
45%.
the revenue is down 44%.
And I spoke with Cy about this. Over the last, at a 3-year comparison, we were never meeting what we were budgeting as the income. I felt responsible, and I feel like we should be accountable for what we're actually bringing in dollars. So I had addressed that with Cy, and that's why you see the reduction.
Well, I need to correct me on that.
Yes.
So it's 45% from the budgeted number, or for 45% from the real number?
Budgeted number from last
We
year.
really ought to be talking from real number. Are you down from the real number? Or is it?
Yeah, looks like it is. We're 675 5,000 through, what is this, through middle of October or something like that? Yeah, the year-to-date 10-month number, 9.5-month number is about 675,000. So clearly, we're not going to hit $1,340,000, which is what was budgeted.
No, and Commissioner Benton, again, former U.S. Marshal Jeff Balzer might be able to talk a little bit as to why those numbers are down. So, Jeff, if you'd like to share with the board.
It's really an interesting situation. The U.S. Marshal Service for the Southern District of Ohio is way up on their prisoners, which you would think that'd mean an increase for us. They, in years past, maybe had a little over 300 prisoners on a daily basis for the district, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton. Now they're up around 450, so quite an increase. What's happening, recently, because they needed a place to house these inmates, they've actually secured a contract with the regional jail up in the far northwestern part of the state. And my understanding is that they've worked out some agreement with this facility where they need to hold at least 50 people in this facility. So as strange as it may seem, the numbers have gone up for the Marshal Service, but they're diverting some of those inmates up to this facility in order to satisfy their contract. We're down right now. I was talking with Director Shelley Fan yesterday about this. And it's something, we work with the Marshal Service when they need to put people up here, and we certainly are quite willing to take them up here. We just also have to look at our needs as far as security matters. We can't have too many high-level security inmates at the same time. But we are down significantly from earlier this year, so that's something we're going to address with the marshals to try to get our numbers back up. I think a reasonable number, if we can get it back up, would be around 30. And right now, like I said, we're down. I saw the count this morning was around 9.
Yes.
Down 9 or you have 9?
We're down to 9 prisoners. Part of that was some of the folks we were holding, just when their cases get complete, they get shipped off. So I think that's part of it. We had probably the last couple of weeks, maybe 8 or 10 of those folks just get shipped out because they were done with the end of their cases here. But we just haven't received any new inmates recently.
Are the, what is it, the posse from Franklin County?
Yeah, sure.
They're
I
gone.
know they're gone.
We had them for a good portion of 2015 and 2016. and
Okay.
There's quite a few of them in our jail for an extended period of time. I will tell you, there's pretty stressful times on the staff.
Yeah,
That was a
yes.
bad group of
Right.
fellas, but the staff did admirable on that. But we had some discussions also with the marshals that we think we can handle that level of inmate, but we also want to balance, we don't want to be overloaded with those types of inmates in our facility.
Yes.
So, and again, it speaks to the need for the PREA compliance. We certainly don't want the Department of Justice to come back and deny us an opportunity to house these prisoners. It's been a revenue stream for the county for a long time, so we see that. There's always that balance between how many do we take to maintain that revenue stream. We've got the capacity for it. So, but all the way back to the beginning, I appreciate Ms. Armstrong wanting to reflect more accurately what we anticipate as far as income in that fund for 2018.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of just extending that, we're budgeting $755,000 for next year. In 2015, we were at $1,512,000, then $1,250,000, and then $1 million. Well, this year will be around $800,000. So clearly, the trend is down. But doesn't that help with staff? Can't we manage the costs with reduced jail population? I guess is where I'm kind of asking.
Yeah,
I think it's in the difference of the types of inmates that you're dealing with. Versus the federal inmates versus the actual average inmate that is coming in. Those numbers aren't changing in that instance, correct? We are still having that flow.
Right, and the reality is, too, even though we're down, let's say 21, if we're using a general number of 30 federal prisoners, we still have all of the wings or the areas open in the jail, so we still have to maintain staffing. Where not all the federal prisoners are in the maximum security, but probably more than half. But all the prisoners we have in that unit are not all federal. So even minus the federal inmates, we still have need to staff that. We can't go below certain staffing levels, even if we would only have, let's say in a pod that can hold maybe 20 inmates, even if we only have 10, we still have to have the same staffing level of having a CO on that unit then.
Okay.
You might appreciate the numbers provided on page 7 in the business plan. It gives some average counts.
Yeah, it seemed like it was pretty steady.
Yeah.
Over the years when you add them all up.
Yes.
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay. On the jail, we've got $1 million. Do we want to talk about capital spending at this point? Because we got a lot of capital spending in the plan as well, both on the law enforcement and the jail side.
Correct. So on the jail side, originally in 2017, we requested the Sally Port and booking expansion area. We requested funds. That project did not get complete in 2017, but we've worked with SI in order to ensure that we have the dollars available. We do have the project en route and working through the contracts now so that that project is complete for 2018. So that's a big portion of the capital expenditures for the jail, is that Sally Port and booking expansion. And then I'll just kind of walk through the other 3 items. Intercom system. The intercom system is currently obsolete. We cannot find parts for it to actually make it consistently work, which is a safety hazard. The showers. We continue to get health department discussions because our showers are not meeting compliance. And then finally, we have a shrink wrap machine. It's a very small amount, but it's necessary. Again, it's a replacement to what we currently have.
Okay.
It's not captured in anything we've provided for you, but we were very encouraged. Most recently, the Ohio legislature just passed a law allowing us to use inmate commissary fund to offset the cost for additional security in the form of a body scanner. It's part of the reconstruction project that we've got going on right now. That's a $200,000 piece of equipment to kind of do like an x-ray scan of inmates coming in. We were concerned that we were going to have to present to this board that $200,000 expenditure. We've now been granted in the law the ability to use money from our inmate commissary fund, so we're not going to be coming for you for that money. We've got that in a commissary account that we can pay for, so I thought that was a small win at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I had any questions on any of the other areas. I think they're all relatively small. A lot of them are zero. Mm-hmm. We've got a federal grant under LEAP.
Yes.
That's 147 in the budget, and it's 107 this year. What's going on there?
That's based upon the match, and also, and I've actually worked with Karen through this because I'll be very honest, the LEAP grant itself, because it ends June 30, you have to budget for 6 months for the remaining, as well as the 6 months that are coming in. So the match is down, or I'm sorry, the 107,000 compared to the 37,000 from the prior year. It's just because the match has been met prior to that budget year ending.
What is the difference between Leap Forward and LEAP? Okay.
It's just how it's termed in the system.
Okay. There were different numbers in there. What about the concealed carry area? We're budgeting slightly lower revenue, reduction in expenses. I assume it's just lower demand.
Exactly, correct.
I figured that would be the case. Okay, I guess a couple other just general comments. Are there fee opportunities? Have we looked at the pricing of the costs to provide law enforcement continues to go up. We all struggle with that, but it's a reality. Are there ways to help offset some of those costs with different revenue sources, fines, fees, whatever?
definitely always exploring those opportunities. It's kind of like what we did with our 3 court security officers. We are looking for ways to get reimbursement. We do that through the SROs, with the schools and the contracts. We actually have built in for this next contract coming with the schools the overtime that could be involved. So we review these, and again, me being semi-new to the situation, we are always looking for opportunities where we can get reimbursed. I think on one of the capital requests, we are looking for a bloodhound for 2018. We just recently had a canine put in place. We received a donation for that. We're going to do that again for 2018. Obviously, it's on our budget right now, but we would like to seek funds. So we are definitely exploring those opportunities. We do some very minor billings, but they are defined by law and what we are allowed to charge for. And we try to be reasonable when we look at those. So we definitely are exploring those. And again, we are reviewing them just to see if we can increase and maybe not impact the budget as we do.
I might add, we do look for ways to, although we're not an enterprise system, trying to make money, obviously, and I think that speaks to a core philosophy of public safety as a core need for the community. But I was in Mercer County a couple weeks ago. There are other parts in the county that are charging less per day for prisoners, or inmates, I should say. So I'm always a little cautious about pricing us out of housing. Matter of fact, I talked to the Mercer County Sheriff, and he had inmates brought from an hour and a half away because of the cost that they're charging $45 a day for their inmates. So there's always that balance of not reaching a tipping point where we lose opportunities. But the other thing is in our financial compliance, we think that might be opportunities to better audit how we're receiving money for pay for stay in our jail and some of those things. It's more on the collection side than it is on trying to generate something new. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, but I don't know that we'll ever really have much of a windfall in this, in public safety or law enforcement.
Okay. I didn't really have a whole lot else. I think as Commissioner Merrill alluded, I think, again, what you're requesting makes sense. We don't debate that it makes sense. We just debate, okay, how much do we have coming in? How can we pay for everything that you've requested, and you guys do a great job. So I think my final message would be just prioritize, and we don't know how much. We haven't really pulled together the total roll-up of all the departments and offices, but inevitably at this point we're always short. That's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Sure.
And so anyway, again, I would encourage you to continue to work on priorities and vacancy. There's probably some room there to help save appropriated dollars, and we can continue to work together to figure this thing out so we can get you the best set of resources we can. We can put money together to afford.
Well, we're certainly interested in continuing to provide the best information for the commissioners to help you make the decisions that you have to make. I don't think it's a particularly good metric, but I know that in some counties they measure the sheriff's overall budget as a percentage of the commissioner's full general fund. And I still think that we do a pretty good job of holding the line on that. Sometimes when I look at some of the other peer counties out there. So, I feel confident that we're vetting internally on the same philosophy that you folks have by the time it gets to you. But at the end of the day, we'll do anything that we can to provide more information for you.
Yeah, and again, appreciate that. We do want to work together to do the best job we all can. So we really appreciate it. I didn't know anybody had.
I have a couple.
Commissioner Merrill. Okay.
First of all, just a comment. When I'm questioning the courthouse transition to the sheriff, I'm not questioning its better service. The question I have to ask is, we have to place a value on what that better service is. $170,000 may be very reasonable. If it's $500,000, it may not be. My responsibility is to, for the benefit of the taxpayers, to justify that number makes sense versus the way we were doing it. Okay, so just want to make that comment, make sure there's no misunderstanding. I have a couple other, as our federal employees go down, assuming that's a trend that continues, at some point, we may have to ask ourselves, do we want to stay in that business? At some point, the cost of, and therefore subsidizing federal employees is not worth it, and we may have to decide it's just something we shouldn't be doing. And with that, can you reduce some level of labor costs? Because I realize you have 2 or 3, you probably still have to staff somewhat the same. At some point, and I'm not saying we should, but I'm saying that's an exercise you should be going through all the time. And just a comment.
Right, and we're prepared to do that, and frankly, I think the acquisition of Ms. Armstrong, she brings that skill set to do a better analysis of that, and we're always looking at those cost-effective measures, so.
And it might be reasonable in the next contract to ask for a minimum number of employees they're going to provide if we're going to provide that service, I thought. Also, if you could prioritize your capital expenditures, like we asked you to do on the employee side, and maybe with a little more explanation than what we have on this sheet. Another unrelated area, in the past, Orange and Concord have asked for sharing of sheriff support. Is that in any discussion, or is that just gone today?
Well, I mean, even to clarify that, they've asked for additional law enforcement presence. I've provided for them what I think is a model which shows a shared cost between the county and those particular townships. I continue to have some of those sidebar conversations with trustees on a periodic basis, but the reality of it is, after 5 years of sitting in this seat as a sheriff, no township has in earnest pursued that. So we'll continue. When people call 911, the Delaware County Sheriff's Office is going to be there. We think we're providing great service to our unincorporated areas, and I think where the struggle is when people ask for what we term as community policing, more residential speed enforcement in their neighborhoods. We're not funded at that level. And I, in good conscience, can't come before this board and ask for it. I mean, if you think this is an increase, and it is, but to come before you and ask for another $3 or $4 million to provide that community policing, I don't think that's our charge in the Ohio Revised Code. We're there to provide public safety and maintain order. And but I'm always very interested in being at the table with the commissioners and the trustees to try to reach a mutual agreement on how to provide some of that level of service to a shared cost. But long story short, nobody in earnest has taken me up on it yet.
And I hadn't heard anything in the last 18 months, 2 years, but there were, last 3, 4 years, Concord and Orange both had made Orange was doing something, got out of it, and then there were some conversations, and I just wondered where that stood. I don't have a...
Yeah, I mean,
opinion.
frankly, I would like to see public safety levies put on the ballot in some of those areas, but they're still specifically fire levies. So I think those particular townships wrestle with, the funding stream for that. But to tell you what I believe the Sheriff's Office provides a good service, I think day in and day out, the needs of the community are being met, even in our highly populated Orange, Concord, and Liberty Township. They're still getting great service from the Delaware County Sheriff's Office, but we're not running speed radar on a daily basis in their neighborhoods, only when we have people available.
Okay.
Yes, it was interesting to read the calls for service, and getting to Commissioner Merrill's point, too, the only township that does fund their own police department through a levy is Genoa Township. And, of course, we've been doing that for several years, and people are extremely happy with the community policing. So, but then it's up to those residents as to whether they want to spend the extra money on a levy. And because can't do it from the county. You cannot community police all the different areas.
I will tell you, we still field an awful lot of calls for that speed enforcement in the residential areas, and we do the best we can on that. But to your point, Commissioner, I always tell the trustees, you have to do what your residents want.
Right,
And
exactly.
there's always a cost for service.
Right.
But, at the end of the day, if somebody gets on the phone and calls 911, they're going to get the full service from the Delaware County Sheriff's
Yes.
Office in an emergency, no doubt about it. And it's going to be a good service that shows up.
Oftentimes that comes up, I won't use the township, but I think a couple, 3 years ago, there was a person out in the county that had a delayed whatever, and then it kind of gets expanded and maybe with the trustee or whatever, and it gets to be a bigger issue than, and it's not the normal level of service, it just happened to be that particular incident, that particular time, there wasn't anyone close, and so it gets exaggerated a little bit sometimes, and I think that sometimes leads to those conversations.
Yeah, and I think that overall, crime trends still seem to be coming down. And that's attributed to a lot of things. Now, we've indicated shoplifting is up. We've got more retail expansion in the community, so we're going to have some of that. And we're going to deal with that. We're going to target some of that in 2018. But I think a measurement that often goes overlooked is just that soft measurement, how do people feel about their law enforcement. And frankly, if they see them in their neighborhood more often, it provides a sentiment of that they feel safer. So we're out and about, we're doing a great job, but we're working hard, and we're probably not in some of those residential areas like people would maybe would appreciate. And we understand that, but we also know there's a cost associated with that.
A community decision, bottom line,
Correct.
if they want the extra community policing. In the primary trends, too, and I really appreciated, I thought it was a great annual work plan report, and drug and narcotic reports. Any want to add anything? You mentioned up by 64%.
Yeah, the opiate problem's not going away. We have the best drug task force in the state of Ohio. I mean, frankly, there's a capital request in there. We're bursting at the seams. Our reputation is so good that other people have now joined our efforts. We have a commitment from the Columbus Police Department. Frankly, that's first ever. The chief of police, I met with her a couple months ago. She wants to assign a member of the Columbus Police Department to our drug task force.
Great.
Since I've been here, Dublin Police Department's come on board, Westerville has come back. It's no secret, the problems in our state with the opiate and drug problems. And our guys, our first-line responders are seeing it in traffic stops out there. We've had some intentional activity to try to curb some of that. Initiatives, week-long initiatives where we pay some overtime to target some specific areas. And so that problem's not going away. And as you well know, Commissioner, we're very involved in the Stepping Up initiative. We've taken a holistic approach in trying to help people who are addicted to try to get them assistance. As long as we've got consumers, we're going to have dealers. So we've got to try to attack this from both ends, not only the resource end of it, but also the desire end of it, too. And we feel like we're part of that problem-solving effort. There's a
Definitely
cost
been a-
associated, too, in our budget for that, too.
State leader in that.
We are, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
National, too.
Well, yes, we are.
Yeah. Thank you, that's all.
Okay. Other questions, comments for Lon or Si?
Unless any summary?
No, I appreciate the tough decisions you have to make. I was coming in this morning, and I thought if you've got to eat a couple of toads, you eat the big one first. So I suppose the sheriff's office budget's the biggest toad that you've got to eat. We hope it goes down fairly well, but, we understand that we're part of a larger pie, and, we have, my staff has worked hard to put together the needs of the office, and we're more than willing to work with you to prioritize and to work with you and Si through the entire process. So let us know what else we can provide for you.
Okay.
Commissioner,
Oh, yes.
I have one
Present.
request of the sheriff and the major, actually. Sometime in the near future, John Melvin will be starting conversations with the city about the disposition of the alley between the courthouse and police. It's an alley, it's a thoroughfare, but as you get past the courthouse, you can see it gets very steep. I have concerns about cars sitting inside, even when people are trying to walk in between. And there's going to be quite a bit of movement, employee movement between the police building and the courthouse. So John and I feel that we should actually make a case to try and have that alley abandoned. Maybe it can just become part of the right of way, and employees can use that area for lunch and other activities. People do smoke. As much as we don't want people to smoke, they do smoke, and that's where they'll come out to smoke. And, when you come out there, the optics make a difference. When you see a lot of bricks,
Yeah.
a lot of pavers, you don't see that as a road. You see that as a sidewalk. So I might be out there with my cigarette thinking that's a sidewalk, and here comes a car, and I'm going to dodge it. I have some concerns about that, and I would appreciate if you get a chance to, I'm not going to put you on the spot now.
Appreciate that.
When you have a chance to talk with each other and maybe talk to John Melvin, if you would consider lending your support to that conversation.
Yeah, obviously coming from as a former chief of police, I understand the dynamics of those decisions. Whenever you vacate an alley or a street, I've been a part of those conversations since the onset of this, so I understand some of the emotional side of it too. And, I think a lot of it's, if we can get some data too on the amount of traffic that's through there, that might help us make a good decision too. So we perhaps can track the volume of traffic through there, and that might help us to make a more objective decision. But
Can I offer a comment?
It's a good point.
Green space is important. If that alley became a green space with some trees and stuff, it might be something the city might have an interest in, because I do think there is a risk of someone getting hit. And I know there's also an interest on the part of the city to have more green space. And if we had control of that alley, or it was abandoned, then theoretically you could make it a kind of like I'm overstating, kind of like a park with some
Amenities, along those
Yeah.
lines, one conversation that some people had was maybe we can invite food trucks every now and then, once a month. And I know that's something the city would be very interested in as
And that
well.
wouldn't necessarily be limited to just the county. The public could use it as well. And that might be a possibility for a win-win. Just a thought. Until you raised it, I hadn't even thought of it candidly, but it just, city might buy into that. You may have a better feel for that.
yeah, I would, just knowing my experience with the city, I do think there's merit if we can get some a data analysis on the volume of traffic. That could be presented in the discussion. My wife's been involved in 2 crashes in this county in 30 years, and one of them occurred in that alley. So there's some risk associated with line of sight and the steepness of it. I understand that. But again, also emotionally, the businesses at the base of that on alley, they like that as a thoroughfare. So, I mean, they'll have to be brought into the discussion too, I think, to make the best decision. Anything else?
Boy, thank you. Great job.
Yeah, that's
Great
it.
preparation.
Thank you very much. We'll keep working at it.
We can talk to Josh Yanowski and Carol.
Aren't there 2 alleys there? Aren't there 2 alleys there? Is there an alley just
The one
south of the church?
Yes, but that one, nobody uses, and that's a one-way. That's a one-way, and it's going to be actually entrance into the courthouse. I'm talking about the alley.
Between the 2.
Between the 2
Between
buildings.
the two.
Right, right. But there's another, I mean,
There's
Well,
another alley
what?
there.
there is an alley to the right of
Right there.
to the south of, so why would, I guess that's part of the argument in my mind is why do you need 2 alleys within a
Yeah.
couple hundred feet of each other?
Yeah.
Emotions, I mean, it's the city's alley, you want to give up an alley, you give up 3 parking spots.
But I didn't understand the comment regarding businesses being bothered. It wouldn't really be bothered by that. There's no
There's
businesses.
no business.
Yeah, so I didn't,
Yeah.
I should have asked that question, but,
And this alley is straight, I have more of a concern is when you come out.
Yeah,
and-
then you have to
And
make
you're getting
the
into the
turn.
parking lot, there are going to be people walking to their cars, they're going to be in the middle of a blizzard, they're not going to be paying attention to what's coming.
Right.
Getting to their car.
Done? Oh. You just stopped before you, oh,
Oh,
we are recessed.
still,
we're still in session.
that was fine. I don't think we said anything. It was a reasonable conversation. It was tied into